All right, so today I want to look at the word wine press. The first mention is Numbers 18:27. In this your heave offering shall be reckoned unto you as though it were the corn of the threshing floor and as the fullness of the winepress. Therefore thou shalt say unto them, when ye have heaved the best thereof from it, then it shall be counted unto the Levites as the increase of the threshing floor, and as the increase of the winepress. Deuteronomy 15:14. Thou shalt furnish him liberally out of thy flock, and out of thy floor, and out of thy winepress, of wherewith the Lord thy God hath blessed thee, thou shalt give unto him. Judges 6:11. And there came an angel of the Lord, and sat under an oak, which was an Oraph, that pertained unto Joash the Abizrite, and his son Gideon threshed wheat by the winepress to hide it from the Midianites. Judges 7:25. And they took two princes of the Midianites, Oreb and Zeb, and they slew Oreb upon the rock. Oreb and Zeb they slew at the winepress of Zeb, and pursued Midian, and brought the heads of Oreb and Zeb to Gideon on the other side Jordan. 2 Kings 6:27. And he said, if the Lord do not help thee, whence shall I help thee? Out of the barn floor, or out of the winepress? Isaiah 5:2. And he fenced it, and gathered out the stones thereof, and planted it with the choicest vine, and built a tower in the midst of it, and also made a winepress therein. And he looked that it should bring forth grapes, and it brought forth wild grapes. Isaiah 63:3. I have trodden the winepress alone, and of the people there was none with me. For I will tread them in mine anger, and trample them in my fury, and their blood shall be sprinkled upon my garments, and I will stain all my raiment. Lamentations 1:15. The Lord had trodden underfoot all my mighty men. In the midst of me he hath called an assembly against me to crush my young men. The Lord hath trodden the virgin, the daughter of Judah, as in a winepress. Hosea 9:2. The floor and the winepress shall not feed them, and the new wine shall fail in her. Matthew 21:33. Hear another parable. There was a certain householder which planted a vineyard, and hedged it round about, and digged a winepress in it, and built a tower, and let it out to husbandmen, and went into a far country. Revelation 14:19. The angel thrust in his sickle into the earth, and gathered the vine of the earth, and cast it into the great winepress of the wrath of God. Revelation 14:20. And the winepress was trodden without the city, and the blood came out of the winepress, even unto the horse bridles, by the space of 1,600 furlongs. Revelation 19:15. And out of his mouth goeth a sharp sword, that with it he should smite the nations, and he shall rule them with a rod of iron, and he treadeth the winepress of the fierceness and the wrath of Almighty God. So let's look at I want to see if I can find this in the dictionary. It's a little bit different here. Okay, so wine vat, wine press. Strong's definition: from an unused root meaning to excavate or trough as dug out, specifically a wine vat, whether the lower one into which the juice drains or the upper in which the grapes are crushed. Press that wine. Move this under. Okay, so we're going to look at Winepress in the Encyclopedia. International Standard Bible Encyclopedia. Winepress. Terms: wine, apparently from a non-Syr root, allied to Greek oinos, Latin vinum, etc. This is the usual word for wine and is found 141 times in the Masoretic text. Let's go down because we want to look at Winepress. Properly speaking, the actual winepress was called Gath, Judges 6:11, and the receiving vat, Numbers 18:27, etc. But the names were interchangeable to some degree. Isaiah 16:10. And gladness is taken away, and joy out of the plentiful field, and in the vineyards there shall be no singing, neither shall there be shouting. The treaders shall tread out no wine in their presses. I have made their vintage shouting to cease. And Job 24:11. Which make oil within their walls, and tread their wine presses, and suffer thirst. Compare Isaiah 5:2. And he fenced it, and gathered out the stones thereof, and planted it with the choicest vine, and built a tower in the midst of it, and also made a winepress therein. And he looked that it should bring forth grapes, and it brought forth wild grapes. The Revised Version, British and American text and margin, and either could be used for the whole apparatus. See Gath and compare Judges 7:25, Zechariah 14:10. All the land shall be turned as a plain from Geba to Rimmon, south of Jerusalem, and it shall be lifted up and inhabited in her place, from Benjamin's gate unto the place of the first gate unto the corner gate, from the tower of Hananiel unto the king's wine presses. In Isaiah 63:3, I have trodden the winepress alone, and of the people there was none with me, for I will tread them in my anger and trample them in my fury, and their blood shall be sprinkled upon my garments, and I will stain all my raiment. The Hebrew has pura, wine trough, a word found also in Haggai 2:16, since those days were when one came to a heap of 20 measures, there were but 10, but one came to the press vat to draw out 50 vessels out of the press, there were but 20. Where it seems to be a gloss, so apparently the American Standard Revised Version. In the Apocrypha, Sirach 33:16, and in the New Testament, Matthew 21:33. Here another parable. There was a certain householder which planted a vineyard and hedged it round about, and digged a winepress in it, and built a tower, and let it out to husbandmen, and went into a far country. In Revelation 14:19, and the angel thrust his sickle into the earth, and gathered the vine of the earth, and cast it into the great winepress of the wrath of God. And the winepress was trodden without the city, and blood came out of the winepress, even unto the horse bridles, by the space of 1,600 furlongs. Twice, Revelation 19:15, winepress is Linos, and out of his mouth go a sharp sword, that with it he should smite the nations, and he shall rule them with a rod of iron, and he treadeth the winepress of the fierceness and wrath of Almighty God. Winepress is Linos in Mark 12:1, and he began to speak unto them by parables. A certain man planted a vineyard, and set an hedge about it, and digged a place for a wine vat, and built a tower, and let it out to husbandmen, and went into a far country. Hypolenian, by which only the receiving vat seems to be meant. The Revised Version, British and America, a pit for a wine press. Winemaking, the vintage. For the care of the vine, its distribution, different varieties, etc., see vine. The ripening of the grapes took place as early as June in the Jordan Valley, but on the coast not until August, while in the hills it was delayed until September. In whatever month, however, the coming of the vintage was the signal for the villagers to leave their homes in a body and to encamp in booths erected in the vineyard, so that the work might be carried on without interruption. The Tabernacles Feast of. It was the great holiday season of the year, and the joy of the vintage was proverbial. Isaiah 16:10. And the gladness is taken away, and joy out of the plentiful field. And in the vineyards there shall be no singing, neither shall there be shouting. The treaders shall tread out no wine in their presses. I have made their vintage shouting to cease. Jeremiah 25:30. Therefore prophesy thou against them all these words, and say unto them, the Lord shall roar from on high, and utter his voice from his holy habitation. He shall mightily roar upon his habitation, and he shall give a shout, as they tread the grapes against all the inhabitants of the earth. And 48:33. And joy and gladness is taken from the plentiful field and from the land of Moab, and I have caused the wine to fail from the winepress. None shall tread with shouting, their shouting shall be no shouting. Compare Judges 9:27, and fragments of vintage songs seem to be preserved in Isaiah 27:2. In that day sing ye unto her a vineyard of red wine. And 65:8. Thus saith the Lord, as a new wine is found in the cluster, and one saith, destroy it not, for a blessing is in it. So I will do for my servant's sake, that I may not destroy them all. The grapes were gathered usually by cutting off the clusters, see sickle, and were carried to the press in baskets. Wine presses. Many of the ancient wine presses remain to the present day. Ordinarily, they consisted of two rectangular or circular excavations, hewn. Isaiah 5:2. And he fenced it and gathered out the stones thereof, and planted it with the choicest vine, and built a tower in the midst of it, and also made a wine press therein. And he looked that it should bring forth grapes, and it brought forth wild grapes. And the solid rock, to a depth of 2 or 3 feet, where possible, one was always higher than the other, and they were connected by a pipe or channel. Their size, of course, varied greatly, but the upper vat was always wider and shallower than the lower, and was the press proper, into which the grapes were thrown, to be crushed by the feet of the treaders. Isaiah 63:1-3. Who is this that cometh from Edom, with dyed garments from Bozrah? This that is glorious in his apparel, traveling in the greatness of his strength. I that speak in righteousness, mighty to save. Wherefore thou red in thine apparel, and thy garments like him that treadeth in the winepress. I have trodden the winepress alone, and of the people there was none with me. For I will tread them in my anger, and trample them in my fury, and their blood shall be sprinkled upon my garments, and I will stain all my raiment. The juice flowed down through the pipe into the lower vat, from which it was removed into jars. Haggai 2:16. Since those days were when one came to a heap of 20 measures, there were but 10. When one came to the press vat for to draw out 50 vessels out of the press, there were but 20. Or where it was allowed to remain during the first fermentation. Many modifications of this form of the press are found. Where there was no rock close to the surface, the vats were dug on the earth and lined with stonework or cement, covered with pitch, or press vat might be built up out of any material. Wood was much used in Egypt, and from it the juice could be conducted into sunken receptacle or into jars. Not infrequently, a third, rarely a fourth, vat might be added between the other two, in which a partial settling and straining could take place. Wooden beams are often used either to finish the pressing or to perform the whole operation, and holes into which the ends of the beams fitted can still be seen. A square of wood attached to the beam bore down on the pile of grapes, while the free end of the beam was heavily weighted. In the simpler presses, the final result was obtained by piling stones on the mass that remained after the treaders had finished their work. Grading. In its general principle of winemaking, compare that the less the pressure, the better the product. Therefore, the liquid that flowed at the beginning of the process, especially that produced by the mere weight of the grapes themselves when piled in heaps, was carefully kept separate from that which was obtained only under heavy pressure. A still lower grade was made by adding water to the final refuse the mixture to ferment. Possibly this last concoction is sometimes meant by the word vinegar, chomet. Fermentation. In the climate of Palestine, fermentation begins almost immediately, frequently on the same day for juice pressed out in the morning, but never later than the next day. At first, a slight foam appears on the surface of the liquid, and from that moment, according to Jewish tradition, it is liable to the wine tithe. Maseroth 1:7, the action rapidly becomes more violent, and while it is in progress, the liquid must be kept in jars or in a vat, for it would burst even the newest and strongest of wineskins. Job 32:19. Behold, my belly is as wine which hath no vent. It is ready to burst like new bottles. Within about a week, this violent fermentation subsides, and the wine is transferred to other jars or strong wineskins. Mark 2:22. And no man putteth new wine into old bottles, else the new wine doth burst the bottles, and the wine is spilled, and the bottles will be married, but new wine must be put into new bottles. And parallels, in which it undergoes a secondary fermentation, and the bottom of the receptacles collects the heavier matter or lees. Shemarim, Psalm 75:8. For in the hand of the Lord there is a cup, and the wine is red. It is full of mixture, and he poureth out the same. But the dregs thereof, all the wicked of the earth, shall wring them out and drink them. Dregs. Jeremiah 48:11. Moab hath been at ease from his youth, and he had settled on his lees, and hath been emptied from vessel to vessel. Neither hath he gone into captivity, therefore his taste remained in him, and his scent is not changed. And it shall come to pass at the time that I will search Jerusalem with candles, and punish the men that are settled in their lees, that say in their heart, the Lord will not do good, neither will he do evil. And in this mountain shall the Lord of hosts make unto all people a feast of fat things, a feast of wines on the lees, of fat things full of marrow, of wines on the lees well refined. The word is used for the wine as well, from which the wines on the lees gather strength and flavor. At the end of the 40 days, it was regarded as properly wine. Interesting, at the end of the 40 days, and could be offered as a drink offering. The practice after this point seems to have varied, no doubt depending on the sort of wine that was being made. Certain kinds were left undisturbed to age on their lees, and were thought to be all the better for so doing. But before they were used, it was necessary to strain them very carefully. So Isaiah 25:6. And in this mountain shall the Lord of hosts, make unto all people a feast of fat things, a feast of wines on the lees, of fat things full of marrow, of wines on the lees, well refined. A feast of wine aged on the lees, thoroughly strained, but usually leaving the wine in fermentation vessels interfered with its improvement or caused it to degenerate. So at the end of the 40 days, it was drawn off into other jars for storage. 1 Chronicles 27:27. And over the vineyards was Shimei and Remathite. Over the increase of the vineyards for the wine cellars was Zabdi and or wineskins for transportation. Joshua 9:4. They did work willily and went and made as if they had been ambassadors, and took old sacks upon their asses, and wine bottles old and rent and bound up. So Jeremiah 48:11, Moab has been distributed from his youth, and he has rested on his lees and had not been emptied from vessel to vessel. Therefore his flavor remains unchanged or becomes insipid, and his scent is unimproved or lacks freshness. And it shall come to pass at that time that I will search Jerusalem with candles, and punish the men that are settled on their lees, that say in their heart, the Lord will not do good, neither will he do evil. Storage. Okay. I think that's all we're going to look at for the wine press. Let's see if there's any other wine press under here. Wine press in the Vine's Expository Dictionary of the New Testament words denotes a trough or vat used especially for the treading of grapes. Matthew 21:33. Not infrequently they were dug out in the soil or excavated in a rock, as in the rock vats in Palestine today. The wine press of the wine. The word is used metaphorically with reference to the execution of divine judgment upon the gathered foes of the Jews at the close of this age, preliminary to the establishment of the millennial kingdom. Strong's wine press vat was a vessel or trough beneath the press itself for receiving the juice, a pit for the wine press. From the sanctity notices contained in the Bible, we gather that the wine presses of the Jews consisted of 2 receptacles of vats placed at different elevations, and the upper one of which the grapes were trodden, while the lower one received the express juice. The 2 vats were mentioned altogether in Joel 3:13. Put ye in the sickle, for the harvest is ripe. Come, get you down, for the press is full. The fats overflow, for their wickedness is great. All right, I think that's all we're going to look at for wine press for today.